It looks like we are live.
This is our first Twitch studio ever!
So this is super exciting. Andrea, do you want to tell us a bit about us, why we're doing this, and so on?
Yes. So first of all, I'm very happy to be here. First time on Twitch. I knew Twitch already. I'm not that old, but I didn't never use it. So I'm very happy to do my first live. And to tell you about us, my name is Andrea Benzon. I'm Italian, based in London. And basically, I'm here because it's many years that I'm working on building communities and movement to try to solve the biggest problems of our time, the biggest challenges of our time. And right now, together with Colomb here, that is going to introduce herself, we are starting, or we started a few years ago now, but we are trying to build up more and more a big community called Atlas. And we have a very big dream. But Colomb, you want to tell us more about that?
Yes, but 2 seconds because we
There's
have
an
an
echo.
issue. An
First
issue.
stream,
So hi, I'm Colombe. I'm French, as you can hear from my accent. I have a background in human rights and in community organizing, as Andrea said. We built political parties across Europe and then realized that a lot of the topics we're interested in, like climate, like fair migration, and so on, were global and not European, so that we're mistaken. Something I should have mentioned is we're very progressive. So we didn't just build random political parties across Europe. We built progressive political parties. And so we built Atlas. And Andrea already mentioned it. We have tens of thousands of volunteers and members across 144 countries, which is super, super cool. And together, we try to deal with global issues. So, for example, we did a few campaigns. One of them was to get the World Health Organization to actually distribute vaccines to health workers across the world, regardless of their nationalities. So if you were a health worker in Nigeria, you should have had access to vaccines at the same time than a health worker in the US. And they actually ended up saying, yeah, you guys are right, we should definitely do it. And that was after we got a lot of Instagram doctors to share the message.
Very sexy Instagram doctors. Yeah.
So we did this for a long time, and now after campaigns on climate, we held a lot of protests across the world to support freedom struggles. For example, in Hong Kong, in Venezuela, in Belarus, and so on. And now we are working on a big, big project at Atlas. And this big project, and it sounds far-stretched, but I promise it's relevant to your life, is to create a global governance. And what we mean by this is a type of like global country. So basically, we already have a global governance system, whether we like it or not. It's called the United Nations. The other thing is you don't have a say, you don't have a voice, and you don't have a way as a result of interacting with it. It's made up of a lot of countries, a lot of them being authoritarian countries like China, like Russia, and a few countries called the Permanent Five, which are Russia, China, the US, France, and the UK. That's five, right?
I think so.
I'm really tired. Have a right of veto, which is very, very undemocratic. And so right now, this is the global governance system we have. We think it's completely inadequate at this stage. It's done a lot of really cool stuff, right? Like it distributed food across the world.
Alleviated poverty, did some work on climate, still prevent some armed conflict for sure. So, I mean, we cannot be completely blind to the positive things they've done. But
it's not enough. So if you look at the state of today's world, and just looking at wars, so for example, Russia invading Ukraine and aggressing it, or if you look at China aggressing Hong Kong, cracking down on freedoms and rights in Tibet, in Xinjiang, and now threatening Taiwan, or if you look at Syria, at Ethiopia and Tigray, and so on, it's not doing great. And it's the same with climate. You know, we are every day getting closer to actually doomsday. And it's really, really scary. And this is because it's not actually set up for success. So do you want to tell us why it's not set up for success before we explain what we're doing with this channel?
yeah, so let's go in the basics. First of all, you cannot have an effective government, institution, however you want it called, without the voice of citizens in it. Like there is no way. The UN is basically right now a place where some power breaking can take place, or some negotiations, some projects, but until you, me, or anyone can actually vote for the representative that sits at the UN, will always be just a platform for nation states to negotiate. And that means that it's already doomed in the first place. In the second place, so it's not only badly designed, but in the second place, you also have the big issue that, for example, I talk about the horrible situation in Ukraine right now. Russia invaded Ukraine. Clearly the UN should do something. I clearly think that Russia is a criminal state right now and should be sanctioned. But let's not even go in the sides. I'm just saying, like, the UN should do something. It's obvious. Everyone can agree on that. But because Russia sits in the top body of the United Nations and has a veto power, simply this is not happening. The UN is completely paralyzed. Even there are big votes in the General Assembly where people say we stand for Ukraine and so on. At the end of the day, the UN is completely powerless. So these are just two very concrete examples of what is not working and why, if we wanted to basically save humanity, because let's remember, there is climate, there are massive wars, there are many, many huge problems. If we don't find a way for humanity to work together, to cooperate, and ensure the next 50 to 100 years we solve the problems, they have doomed our history forever. Conflict between nations, conflict between religions, inability to look beyond our own border and so hoarding resources. If we do not manage to solve that, to fix that, we're going to sadly be in a shit situation in 100 years or 50 years or 20 years. So this is why we're doing what we're doing.
Exactly. And we thought of starting this Twitch channel. So as I mentioned, this is the first time ever we set up such a channel. So all of the tips and so on are highly welcome for a few reasons. One of them is, so our movement has a lot of different social media accounts and so on, but it's often super hard to actually interact with people and discuss meaningfully. And on Twitch, it's much easier through the chat, etc. So we wanted to be super interactive to discuss kind of global news and why they're relevant to your life, and also crowdsource kind of best practices coming from your country. So for example, when we talk about climate, whether you live in London, in Nairobi, or in Delhi, you have different stuff that are being done that work and that we could use across the world to learn from them, to implement them, and so on. And so basically our hope is by discussing those news together, we can create a global consciousness, and we can try as best as possible to work together to show that through unity we have a way forward.
Exactly. So it's a very ambitious task, and obviously we start from nothing, but we have a very good community on other platforms that hopefully will slowly migrate here. We have our energy, we have a lot of hope, so we're trying our best. So I think that now, Colombe, we should jump into the content for today. Do you feel like it? Do you think we should do some
I'm so
pictures?
ready. I'm so ready. So today we thought of tackling a few news.
Yes.
One of them, perfect, you have them here. My glasses are good, but I can't read that far.
Okay.
So do you want to tell us what is up for today?
So this morning, I have to say, Colombe did an amazing job of selecting the biggest news of today. Not only like the one that you hit the top lines in the newspapers or whatever, but actually the one that matters the most for many of us. And I think it's a wonderful job.
Thank you.
And so she isolated the following topics. And if you have others I think they're important, just suggest them in the chat. First of all, the protests in Iran. So we're going to talk about the protests in Iran. Obviously, they've been going on for weeks now. They're very important, and we're going to discuss what's going on. Second one is a kind of, not fun, but like interesting, exciting news. That is Germany is planning to legalize again recreational cannabis. So the drugs topics, the psychedelic topics, very important.
I'm so excited about this one, and I don't mean it in a way. I don't do cannabis, by the way, but I think it's really a great way forward.
I don't do cannabis. I think it should be super legal. But
yeah.
I don't. And the third topic is a controversial one. Actually, not controversial for us, but for the world. Is how China is using police stations abroad to crack down on dissidents. Meaning, you are from Argentina, there might be a Chinese police station, a clandestine Chinese police station in Argentina, trying to control Chinese abroad in Argentina. Very interesting topic and very scary, if you ask me. And then we're gonna cover a very important news. That's probably gonna be our focus for the day after this live. There is the windfall taxes on energy companies. Energy companies are making a shitload of money because of inflation, because of the disruption that is going on all over the planet. Even if we are paying a lot of money, so there is a problem there. Like we've been told, you pay a lot of money for your bills because basically energy supply is disrupted, and so on. But then how come an energy company are making so much more money than normal? And I'm talking about profits, so not only sales, but actually the money they put in their own pockets. So there is something that doesn't work there. And then we'll cover a couple other news about the World Cup and the Russia crackdowns on rights. So very interesting topics. He's the mastermind behind the selection. So if you don't like the selection, I'm really sorry. Like, it's her fault.
Everything is always my fault. No, but please, the whole point basically of this is to kind of talk together about the news. And what we'll try to do is often there's one positive news, I think, which is Germany's plan to legalize cannabis. And apart from this, it's only shit news. Because unfortunately, when you read the news, most of it is shit. So what we'll be doing is mainly looking at shit news and explaining why there's actually hope, despite the fact that, again, it's really bad. And the way we'll do this is we'll show you that a lot of those news, I haven't selected them randomly. I haven't just gone on well, I have been on BBC for morning, but I haven't just been on BBC and kind of selected all news. I selected news that I think are of global relevance. And we'll show you how this has an impact in your country, in your life. So tell us in the chat where you're from and how you view it as well. And then we'll show you how basically if we all join forces on those topics, it would be much better. And also that there's not really another way but to join forces on those topics.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the Twitch channel, basically. I select random news in the morning that I think are global. You send me some as well. We discuss it. We learn from your best practices. We'll take note of them and we'll use them in our movement after as well. And we try to create a global consciousness around topics that impact us all. And something that we haven't said, what we mean by global consciousness and topics that impact us all is, again, I'm French, he's Italian, we have people from all over the world. Even if my country, France, was to certainly do the right thing when it comes to climate and actually deal with it, unless you had the US, Italy, and other countries that did it as well, we would all still be completely fucked.
Yeah.
And that's the truth. So this is a global topic. Countries need to do better individually, but also all countries need to do better globally. And right now, we don't have a system to ensure it's the case. So that's what we need by global news. And global consciousness is often news are not presented this way. It's not like, look, Amazon is not paying its taxes in Sweden, and that's a Swedish news. No, Amazon is not paying its taxes in Sweden and in most other countries, and this has a global consequence. Our public service go underfunded. And as a result, by the way, I think Twitch works with Amazon somehow, so great.
Yeah, it's actually owned by Amazon.
Great, so we can talk about how Amazon doesn't pay its taxes.
But offer beautiful services, so like there is a role for Amazon, there is a role for Google and so on, but you still need to pay your taxes, my dear.
Exactly. So, and how this is a global topic, how we should be dealing with it together across the world so that we could offer a global tax system so that Amazon would actually pay its taxes across the world. So, and again, sorry, this is our first Twitch, so send us your recommendations as we have no idea how to do this.
And I'm sure that in the next few days we're going to improve the way we do it, we're going to improve the topics we bring forward. It's just a first attempt, but we are full of energy, so we're going to see us for a long, long time. So if you like what we do, help us. So Colum, do you want to open up the conversation with Iran, a very, very, very important, I cannot stress enough, event in our recent current history, and something that especially for women is really important.
Is it Iran or Iran in English?
Iran, let's say.
I actually have no idea.
It's in
Farsi. Please tell us how to pronounce it.
In Farsi is Iran. I don't know.
So to give you the context of why we're speaking about Iran, 41 days ago, I think, protests started to erupt across the country. And that's because the morality police, which is a police force in charge of enforcing what they consider to be Sharia law, killed a woman for not wearing properly her headscarf. So she died while in police custody after being arrested for not wearing properly her headscarf. And this created enormous protests. So for the last 40 days, you've had thousands of people on the streets all over the country. I remember in the first few days, I talked about it with my parents who were like, well, you know, this is going to die out so fast, like in Iran. Yeah. You have a bit of a spark, and then they managed to crack down. But actually, it spread to the entire country, and it's in itself a revolution. You have schoolgirls, women and men, some men all over the country chanting for woman, freedom, life. Yeah. You have women cutting their hair in a sign of protest. And we wanted to talk about it because yesterday you had a day of mourning. Basically, you had protesters coming out and going to the grave of the young woman who was killed by the morality police. And the police fired at the crowd and killed people and launched tear gas. And it didn't deter protesters. Protesters are going out by the thousands again and again and again. But I think it was something to bring about, not only just for Iran and to talk about, the incredible bravery of people who know that they will literally be targeted after this, but who are fighting for their basic rights of choosing what to wear and what to wear. But also because, and then I want to hear your take on this on that, because we always talk. Let me rephrase this. As I mentioned, I'm French, and in France I think France is a very Islamophobic country. And for example, we crack down on the right of women to wear a burqa, to wear a headscarf, or to wear anything else. And we don't talk about this, right? It's like we talk about the fact that Islam is trying to hurt our society and so on, instead of just, women should have the right to wear a headscarf or not to wear a headscarf. It's their basic right to decide what to do. And we don't celebrate just as much protesters, even though it's a free country, theoretically, in which it's not dangerous to protest. But we don't link those different struggles together. The struggle of a woman to have ownership over her body, to wear whatever she wants to wear on a given day, and the need to support those across the world, whether it's in Iran, where women should be able to cut their hair, let it out, or not, or in France, where women need to be able to wear a headscarf if they want to wear a headscarf.
Or in the US, where now abortion is under threat. So yeah, many struggles are actually common and across borders. Common meaning like shared between people. So my point of view in all of this is very simple. Like, of course, for me, Iran is another criminal state. Sadly, they are managed to grip upon power since now, like, 40 years or so. So clearly, they are not going away anytime soon. They are playing a lot on, obviously, religious topics, and they are trying to capture religious fanatics. They did so successfully. So it's a sad situation. It's going to take a long time to, if I may say, liberate Iran from fanatics. I know that Iranian people are very resilient. I know the Iranian people are very strong. You have networks of Iranians fighting for freedom across the planet. You have Iranians defying the regime every day at home. But let's say I'm very, very motivated and inspired by the protests that are ongoing right now, because I think the only way to change a regime is actually from people from outside to stand up, and people from outside like us.
From inside, you mean?
People from inside to stand up and stand against dictatorship, while people from outside, like all of us, should support and be extremely supportive of the struggle. And here is where I think, sadly enough, as many times, we are all failing. And it's very difficult to see how we could do better. But in practice, let's think about it. Now, Iranian women are standing up for their freedom. A few governments express their sympathy, a few parliaments express their sympathy. But in practice, did anything change? Did we sanction more heavily Iran? Did we try to send aid to these women? Did we try to negotiate with Iran, for example, to remove some sanction in exchange of freedom to women? I did not see any government taking any meaningful action in that sense. And I know it's more complicated that it cannot happen like as a post on social media, but it's just like a story that you see a lot. It's like in Hong Kong, it's like in other places. There are massive protests, people do incredibly act of bravery, the public is aware and supports them, but then most time these things die out. Why? Because people in the country are suffering a lot and they cannot do everything on their own, and people outside forget and governments do not take action. So I don't know what you think, Colin, but I think here is where something has to change.
Yeah, what I love though is the show of solidarity, right? I think there's something to be said for solidarity across the world. Something we did at Atlas, and by the way, I see people sending us little hearts in the chat, which makes me very happy. So thank you for this.
I send you a heart back.
Something we did at Atlas is we organized protests, I think 100 weeks in a row in support of freedom struggles in Hong Kong, Venezuela, Belarus, and so on, in front of government's building. And we did it not because we necessarily thought it was going to change something, but because we thought that it would be, it would show people. It started actually in support of Hong Kong when Joshua Wong, who's an activist, was imprisoned. And we thought it would show people that, the world cared. And obviously this compared to, actual legislation or sanctions or whatever is little, but we received so many messages on social media, emails of people, etc., saying, look, seeing Europeans, Americans, South Americans, Africans, Asians, and so on going out to protest every Friday for weeks to show us that they care, moved us to tear. And I remember this, like, for me, it's probably the biggest success I've ever had in life, was like to bring together people to support others. Yeah. And you saw the emotional strength. Well, at least that's what people told us, right? Hong Kongers were telling us, this gives us such emotional strength. You guys are playing songs we're not allowed to play. You're displaying signs we're not allowed to display. And it gives us strength. And what I like to see is there's been so many massive protests in support of Iranian women across the world. You've seen, even though it's not enough and you need actions, but you've seen, members of the European Parliament cutting their hair on stage in support. You've seen so many people that are so far from, maybe a couple of months ago didn't even know what Iran was, or, the political situation, that are out on the streets and sending messages of support. And I think for what we're trying to do at Atlas, which is create a global consciousness, work together across borders, go beyond differences to stand a chance, it's incredibly powerful. It's the first step in creating a global consciousness and in uniting. It's to show support and to show that we won't just stand idle while governments are cracking down. Yeah. Then I agree, nothing is being done practically to support enough Iran. And I think this is due to a few things. Number one, when you have sanctions and embargoes and so on in place, it's extremely hard to be able to support humanitarian organizations or groups, etc., right? And then it's often difficult as well for certain organizations to receive support. So I actually don't know what the answer is to people following this. If you guys know, if you guys and girls, I need to stop saying guys, if you all know of organizations of ways of supporting Iranian women and protesters, if you have thought about it, if you live in a country where you needed support and didn't get it, and so on, let us know so that we can relay it. I think that's our strength. We have a network in so many countries. I would be super interested. I have no idea what is the best way of learning what's the best way of doing it.
Sorry, I'm going to do a new one to tap into the story of us for our followers on other social media, as it's our first Twitch, and I think it's very cool to see this way. But let's go back to our work. I fully agree with you. I think for me, there is no solution. So apart from being stronger in general on these topics and try to, comment back, ensure that there are more sanctions, ensure the governments do their job, ensure the governments are at the forefront of the fight for human rights and freedom across the planet, as some governments are doing more and some less. But I think that the solution is basically what we advocate for, or at least one of the solutions. So basically, if there was a body like the United Nations, they had the power to, I'm not saying military intervening countries, even if in the long term this would be it, but to at least severely sanction a country that is cracking down on fundamental freedom in their country, among their people, that would be already a long way to stop this kind of situation. If basically across the planet we could agree that women or any other group have the right or are entitled to wear whatever they want, to behave as they want, and to be whoever they wish to be, then this would be already a wonderful step forward for humankind and probably a solution to many of these issues. What do you think, Coram?
No, I completely agree. It's the long-term thing, right? The long-term solution for me is, again, working as one across the world and as people directly voting for what should be and what shouldn't be and so on. I really believe in this. However, in the meantime, there's the issue of how do you best support protesters in Iran, and this is when I'd like to hear from people. Woo! We've been speaking for 24 minutes.
And that's just the beginning. So I'm just finishing the story and I'm with you.
I'm just reading the chat at the same time. I sent in the chat as well the news we're talking about so that you can also fact check them. Because I'm a fact nut. I hate it when people just talk about the news and you can't fact check it. So I think that's the first thing. So whoever's watching this, feel free to send us your tips. The second thing I wanted to talk about is drugs. So let me give you the context on why I'm interested in drugs since I selected, and not from a personal perspective, but
Very interesting.
not from a personal perspective, but because I've selected the news today to talk about, and I've selected Germany's plan to legalize recreational cannabis. So let me tell you why. I think drugs is a super interesting topic because I think it was in the 60s, whenever, or a bit later, when the US started a war on drug, suddenly attitude became super weird, right? Suddenly everything was criminal. People still in the US are incarcerated for decades at a time for possessing marijuana, which is insane. You can get longer sentences if you had 3 strikes for a marijuana offense than for some white collar crime, which is, it's crazy. And across the world, we have this really weird view of drugs, as in like it's everything that's wrong with society. If you enable drugs, you're gonna have gangs, and you're gonna corrupt the youth, and you're gonna, and the world is gonna go to shit. And breaking news, we actually enable drugs. Alcohol is a drug, right? We just, because of cultural, I'm talking about European countries because I'm based in Europe, because of cultural norms, we don't consider it to be a drug, but it's as addictive, if not way more addictive than most drugs. I drink, so I'm not saying it in a way of like you shouldn't drink. I'm just saying it's completely hypocritical.
Yeah.
Because we already allow drugs, cigarettes, alcohol, and a lot of other stuff. But on marijuana, cannabis, and cocaine, a lot of other stuff, it's like, no, society will go down, we'll all go to hell, it will be done, we'll all die, basically type of behavior. And this has been horrible. It's been horrible for countries, for economies, for families, for the unjust criminal justice system in most countries, and so on.
And also, it just didn't work. I mean, people still do all of this illegally. So
Exactly.
at a certain point, it's also acknowledging about the situation, right?
Exactly. But first, I just want to explain how bad it's been.
Yeah.
So because we've had this weird attitude towards, for example, let's just take marijuana or cannabis, and obviously banning something never works. It just never works, as Andrea said it. It happens. Let's just find a way of doing it that is as safe as possible. Because we've had this weird attitude, you've had entire families that have been broken apart because in all countries people have ended up in prison or with suspended sentences and so on for possessing marijuana. Again, there's bigger ills in society than marijuana. Like, this is really not what we should be focusing on. Then it's actually created a black market economy. The products that people use, whether marijuana or else, are less safe, are not regulated. There's no overview, there's no taxation on it, so the state is losing money on it, and it's still being used. So it's bad. It's worse for your health. It's worse for the state. It's worse for the economy. And there's this type of hype of it's illegal. So basically, a very, very dumb approach that was done in an extremely conservative time in order to shift the focus from real problems that societies were experiencing and to try to find one new evil. Governments often do that. And this time it was drugs. And we created a war on drug, and it was a way of using state resources to, pursue criminals that were corrupting your children. I'm not saying drugs don't actually hurt society. If you look at Colombia and at the Fox and the whole cocaine business, it really hurts. But as we've seen with the war on drugs in Colombia with the new government, it didn't work. So we need to find new ways of addressing this. And as Andrea said, finally, people still do drugs. So the war on drug does not work. And this has been clear for so long. There's been so many studies. I've actually read quite a lot of scientific studies on it, on sociological studies on it. It's one of the topics that infuriates me the most. And it's linked to racism, to racist police stop and searches and so on. But attitudes are not changing or changing very, very slowly. And it's driving me crazy. Until this morning, I saw on BBC, sorry, I dropped something, but I saw on BBC, and I'm back, that Germany was finally thinking of legalizing cannabis. But first, Andrea, do you want to tell us your point of view on not just drugs, but criminalization and lack of legalization of drugs?
I mean, I fully agree with you. I think that I think two things. One, drugs and any substances should be rated on how badly affect your health. And obviously, if there are some that are destructive for your health, you could argue that it's your business and you can do
Yeah,
it.
why would
Because at the end, we still as a society try to avoid people to kill themselves
okay,
as
but
much as
like
possible.
McDonald's is bad for your health, yes, yeah, we allow it.
Yeah,
So
exactly. So I think it's the impact. If there are some drugs that basically if you use them 10 times you die, maybe it's intelligent society also to avoid that the health system get completely overburdened, that there are a lot of death, unnecessary death. I think there is a rationale in trying to limit these
I
substances.
don't agree. If
But
I want to die after using 10 times the drugs, that's my business.
yeah, but then the health system is not your business, right? We pay for you to be at the hospital.
Okay, but again, then why allow McDonald's when you know it will lead to higher level of cholesterol, which will lead to whatever?
Because I think the impact is different. It's like 1% worse, while the other one is like if you do it twice you die. I don't know.
Okay, but
I'm
which
just
drug is that,
exaggerating.
by the way?
I'm completely unaware. I'm
Okay,
saying like
so I'm saying let's talk about real drugs, right? Let's talk
okay.
about cannabis and marijuana, for example.
So I think this is completely fine. Like completely. I was just saying like in the spectrum of drugs, there might be drugs that make sense to limit or control, and there are probably many other drugs that do not make any sense to be limited or controlled. Because exactly as drinking a beer doesn't kill you when you drink a beer, smoking a pot doesn't kill you, it doesn't kill anyone. So
But on this, for example, I see it differently. I don't see it as like, I think if it only helps you, that's your business. I think the problem is if it alters reality so much and you cannot do it in a safe way for others. So, for example, for psychedelics and so on, I'm not against legalizing it at all, but I would say it has to be within certain probably like premises, or it has to be overseen in a way. And it's not necessarily for the state, but you can imagine having like, it's like in coffee shops. You can only smoke in coffee shops in the Netherlands, right? You can't smoke everywhere. You can't, like, it has to be done in a certain way. And for me, that makes sense for drugs that alter your sense of reality. For example, if you risk posing harm to others. Just like you can't drink and drive not only because you risk killing yourself, but because you risk killing others. So for me, this is kind of the limit, but it doesn't mean it can't be legal. It just means it needs to be overseen. It needs to be checked.
yes, but what about that other argument that I brought forward that if there is something that we know might kill you or might severely impair your health, if this happens, there are a lot of social consequences to that. Mean that you need ambulances, you need more hospitals, you need resources allocated to you because of your behavior. So would you? It's a bit like the discussion with COVID when people are saying like I don't want to take a vaccine, but then like yeah, but then you should sign a disclaimer saying like if I die it's my fault, I don't want.
But I think it's very different. I think one, you're taking a hypothetical drug that doesn't exist, so it's not super useful because if it's a hypothetical drug, like we're talking about legalization of actual drugs, like which drug after 10 times are you dead?
I have no clue. But
So,
I suppose heroin can kill. Like,
but
yeah.
it's not 10 times, right?
No,
like,
no,
and if you look at it today, what I'm saying is cigarettes will lead normally to like so much of an increased risk of lung cancer and so on that you'll need cancer treatment provided by the state. And again, we're talking about states with social security and healthcare where you actually get treatment. So not the US.
Not all of them.
You already cost some into the state. Obviously, you shouldn't, but you already do. So how is this different? What I'm saying is like there's a huge hypocrisy around it. Number one, and number two, the drug you're talking, I don't know which one that is. I don't think it exists. But like if it existed, people would do it regardless. So legalizing it or not doesn't change much. And actually, that leads to the second point that I think you researched that is interesting, which is how decriminalization or criminalization actually leads to less usage often, to safer usage, and to a positive outcome on society.
Yeah. And basically, we did a quick research in Portugal, because Portugal in the year 2000, so now like a substantial amount of years ago, decriminalized most drugs, like light, but also some heavier drugs. And what they saw, and I'm reading as I tell you, is that a lot of the consequences of drug abuse actually disappeared. So drug death, obviously prison population related to drug commerce, but also, for example, HIV infection that might come through the usage of syringe and so on. All of these declined. That's very interesting, right? Because if you hear about when people talk about drugs, it's always doomsday scenario. If you legalize drugs, people will like kill each other in the street, drive against school children. But actually, it didn't happen. And I think this, for example, motivated a lot of US states to legalize marijuana, both from a medical point of view, but also for a recreational point of view. So there is now plenty of research that shows that marijuana, basically legalizing marijuana or cannabis, is good for society. Full stop. Like, there's no harm. It's mostly good. Obviously, there are some counter things that can happen, but this happens with alcohol, happens with anything else. So basically, there is a clear policy recommendation that tells you wherever you are in the world, regardless of your culture or so on, it's healthy to legalize marijuana. It's not healthy to do like in many Western countries where it's illegal and always a certain unprivileged part of the population gets prosecuted for that because they are the one that are with the police focus on for prosecution, or not even do like in Singapore where I don't even know what's the consequence of being found with marijuana, but probably cutting a limb or something. I'm joking, but like a very severe consequence. So that's not even the way forward. We're talking a lot about Singapore in these days because I'm so annoyed when I read that Singapore is like a model city.
But it was in the Handmaid's Tale, right?
In the Handmaid's Tale, but I saw like some TikToker showing how you can leave a laptop in Singapore at the Starbucks and no one will steal it because it's so safe, because there is a wonderful culture. It's not because of that. It's because if you steal a laptop, probably you and 10 generations of your family get imprisoned. So it's completely crazy how Singapore is a repressive state. It's a functioning one, but super repressive one-party state. What are the things?
So at least when you're in prison, max 10.
10 years in prison for marijuana.
And if you traffic, I think you can get the death penalty.
I mean, a society with death penalty, sorry for our American friends, but it's clear society there's some issues.
Yeah, more than some issues.
Some many issues.
Let me just check it at the same time.
Yeah, so while Colomb check, I just want
For drug trafficking, you get the death penalty.
Crazy. So basically...
By long drop hanging.
By hanging. And then people say that Singapore is a model society. Like Singapore should not the city of Singapore, but the government of Singapore should be demolished piece by piece and rebuilt in a democratic way, and that's very important. And don't get mistaken because you look like shiny and beautiful. Dictatorship can look shiny and beautiful.
The death penalty is insane. Okay, let's not get sidelined.
Sorry.
So basically, drugs need to be legalized. It's good for society. It happens regardless, right?
Yes. So that's our point. I think that many intelligent people agree with us, but if you don't agree, let us in the comment. And in the meantime...
And also let us know the drug situation in your country. I don't mean like what drugs you find on the street. I mean like whether it's legalized, how, decriminalized, whether it worked, and so on.
And let us also know if you make use of drugs. Like, why not? Like, it should be... Unless
I mean, if it's a criminal offense, don't let us know. Yeah, I don't know if this is public or not. So
if you're in Singapore, don't let us know. Okay, so this was the second. So to recap, protest in Iran for women's rights. That's a perfect example where we need a global federal system to deal with countries authoritarians. Second topic was legalization of cannabis. We fully agree that it should be legalized. Plenty of research that shows that it's good if it's legalized. It doesn't cause any crazy society or people killing each other, but actually it's beneficial. And the third topic that this powerful brain found this morning,
I'm the powerful
brain, is China's use of police stations abroad to crack down on dissent. Colin, do you want me to
go for it? Because I'm trying, actually I would love your help. I'm trying, so there's the chat on the screen, right?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to make it bigger so people can see it, but I could only set it up before, and I didn't set it up properly.
Big failure.
Terrible. So I'm just trying to do it, but it's fine. Just go for it.
I'll continue while Colin tries to fix the chat. I see some people in the chat. Wonderful. Welcome, everybody. So let me continue with the topic of China.
And in the meantime, by the way, I'm linking the news.
Colombe is taking care of the chat. She's all over it. Very important topic. So, China, we in Atlas, our organization, we cover a lot the issue of China being a dictatorship and causing harm to many situations on the planet. But there's a specific one that came out in the last few days. There's the fact that China basically has police stations hidden abroad. What do I mean with that? You live in Canada, you're in Toronto. If you go to China, there will be a cell of the Shanghai police hidden in a shop. They basically monitor the behavior of Chinese citizens abroad. So basically try to extend the police state of China across the planet. What can we say? It's crazy as fuck. And we tell you from a point of view of two people they're actually accused of terrorism in Hong Kong.
Being investigated. Being
Being
investigated.
investigated in Hong
We're
Kong.
not terrorists, by the way. We just held protests.
Exactly. That's what I say. So we actually faced quite often the terror state of China by organizing protests for Hong Kong freedom across the planet.
I like how you want to say the dictatorship state of China, but because they accused us of terrorism, you said the terrorist state.
The terrorist state, yeah. I turned the accusation. But so basically, we know the subject very well, and now it's very scary to hear that even abroad, China has such a grip on dissent and the Chinese population. And it's very sad because I think that for many Chinese residents and people, fleeing abroad basically is the best option they have to experience some freedom and rights and be integrated in a democratic society. And these discoveries show how difficult it must be, even if you want to escape, even if you are ready to cut ties with a dictatorship, how pervasive this dictatorship can be. And I remember, so Colum, now you're going to tell us, I'm sure, about the example you read today. I read, and actually I saw a video a few days back in Hungary about this.
Really?
So there was a discovery in Hungary about a police station, and now, Colum, you have another example, right?
No, I mean, tell us about the Hungary one, because I actually didn't see it.
I just saw that, Momentum is one of the opposition political parties in Hungary. Did a kind of a reportage going to Chinatown, and they found out a cell of the Shanghai police. That's why I mentioned Shanghai in Budapest. So it was just an example. I thought it was like a one random example, and now more articles are coming out from different countries of Chinese police hidden station.
That's fucked up. Okay, the reason for which I put it here, I actually didn't read it today, but I read it yesterday. And for all of the newcomers, what we're doing is we're looking at news and why they matter to you across the world and what we can learn from you to create a type of global consciousness to understand how we can unite and find solutions. And I put this China's use of police stations or of diplomatic services abroad as well, because. So one, it came up in the Netherlands a couple of days ago. I think they uncovered like 5. I just sent the independent link in the chat. I think it was like 5 police stations. Let me find actually how they call it. The overseas service station. So they're supposed to assist you with like diplomatic stuff if you're a Chinese resident, like renewing your passport and so on. But they were actually overseas police stations used to like crack down, threaten and so on distance. And I wanted to put this because for people who don't know, China is an authoritarian state that is cracking down on freedom and rights at home and abroad.
Yeah.
So they crack down on Hong Kong's basic democratic rights, every single freedom and so on. They are occupying Tibet, did the same. They're committing genocide in Xinjiang, and they're threatening Taiwan and much, much more. And again, we're based in the UK. Often it's like, oh, this is dangerous, but it's really far away type of thing. So people got way more worked up about Ukraine. And again, you need to get worked up about Ukraine. I'm not saying the opposite. No. But way more worked up about Ukraine than about Hong Kong, Xinjiang, Tibet, East Kyrgyzstan, Taiwan, and so on. And often I think that like this geographical factor, the fact that we don't necessarily see it super close, changes a lot how we behave towards something. And I'm not even talking about like the intrinsic racist biases countries have and so on, but just the geographical factor. And we often think, well, China is scary, but it's really far away, so like we're kind of safe. And over the years, we've seen that it's not the case. So in the UK, you had some course content in universities that were altered or like surveilled or whatever by some Chinese institutes. Students were scared, students that were either not agreeing, like Chinese are not agreeing with the regime, or that were from Hong Kong, Tibet, or any other part of one of the regions and countries that China is cracking down upon, and that was scared of voicing their opinions in classes in the UK, like because they knew that it could bite them back. And now we see, and it's coming to light, that there are those overseas police stations. Let me find the actual number.
Do they discover it?
Uh,
50.
So the Independent said there's more than 50 unofficial police offices globally, with most of them in Europe, to clamp down on its own dissidents without notifying the authorities or declaring their existence. If you go on the BBC, I think it was actually more what they
More
reported.
than 50. Crazy. I'm gonna find it. Sorry.
I'm just looking it up at the same time. And we're saying this because, right now they're targeting Chinese dissidents, but this is insane. People are coming to other countries, want to, live in other countries, but some are coming because their lives are threatened in their countries. Andre is going to try to take my charger, but my computer is going to die.
Yes, we're gonna alternate.
Because their lives are threatened in their country, in China. And now those diplomatic services are, but for the fact that it's completely illegal, that you're not allowed to do this in a foreign and sovereign country, and so on, they're doing this, actually putting at risk the lives of dissidents in Europe and elsewhere. So for me, this news was a news of very global relevance. As we see more and more authoritarian countries being bold and being just not scared of it. And we saw it with Russia, right? Like when Russia poisoned former agents or officials or dissidents and so on in the UK. And this across the world, right? Like you're not safe anywhere from those authoritarian countries. And again, like we're not hypocrites. The US did the same in other countries. The US, bombed, declared war, committed countless war crimes, and European countries did the same, and so on, in sovereign countries abroad. So this is not mutually exclusive. What I'm saying is right now in the news, we saw China's imperialistic and far-reaching terrorist states cracking down on dissent in Europe. And for me, this is extremely scary. And it's extremely scary to know that it knows no bounds, and that there's very little being done, and it was just one news that passed very fast. Very few people paid attention to it.
Yeah, so sorry, I'm still trying to restart my computer. I don't know what happened. But you understand the extent of the risk we are facing. And it's not to say, again, it's not about the Chinese people. It's really about how the Chinese government, the dictatorship, treats their own citizens, and obviously threaten also other countries and populations. So the fact that more than 50 police stations abroad were found, illegal police stations abroad, it's a massive problem. So the only thing we can say here is that, as we discussed with Iran, we must be very strong, and we must monitor, we must follow what these dictatorships do. First of all, we must be aware of the actions, because this is the first thing we can do, is to at least prevent this thing from happening and protect their citizens abroad. So Chinese people abroad, thanks to the fact that 50 police stations will be shut, might enjoy more freedom and rights than before. So this is a very important achievement of the investigation that has been done. Second thing, we must find a way to deal with dictatorships, and not meaning we don't want to cause world wars, we don't want to start a racist policy against people coming from those countries. But there is a big issue. Russia, China, and similar countries. And again, we also criticize the West for many of the things they have done. But Russia, China, and similar countries are a threat to the world, because simply they are governed by a small elite that is not accountable to anyone. They are self-serving, and its own preservation is actually the main reason why they enact policies and they do anything, Putin, Xi, and so on. So the whole project of building a global, accountable, democratic system, think about the United Nations, but with a parliament and citizens that elect this parliament, or similar system that can tame dictatorship, can sanction them, and can tell them, look, you cannot be part of the international community, you cannot trade with other countries if you don't give basic human rights to your citizens. It's a fundamental fundamental discovery, a fundamental process that humanity has to go through to basically save itself and become better. So this is what we are trying to do at Atlas, and this is what we hope to achieve in the next many decades, as long as it will be needed, but we'll make it happen.
Do you want to tell us, sorry, about the Chinese Communist Party Congress and what happened?
Oh, yeah, we did a video a couple of days ago about that. So they basically, as you probably many of you know, China is a one-party state, meaning only the Communist Party and actually some sister small parties that are affiliated can operate in China and basically dominate the whole government. So the Chinese Party, the Communist Party is basically the government. And every 5 years they hold a congress where basically they renew the whole bodies, governance, and so on. And the one that happened just a few days ago, the 20th Congress, was particularly significant because it kind of certified, it proved the authoritarian, the authoritarian character of the new Chinese leadership. So Xi, the president of China, was already elected twice as leader, and he just received a third term. Why is this scary? It's because according to the Chinese constitution and the Communist Party constitution, a leader can only be elected twice. So he overruled, changed the constitution, he did already a few months back actually, to become a leader again. Who did that before? Who was the only Chinese leader that did it more than twice, became leader more than twice in a row? Mao Zedong.
For those who don't know who it is.
Chairman Mao, so the communist leader that basically created modern China. And he created through a lot of blood and tears. He massacred millions. He left many people in famine. And this, again, is not to compare with what other countries have done. Countries have done horrible shit. I'm Italian. Italians have done horrible shit. Many have done horrible shit. But it's very important to say how the Chinese Communist Party has done horrible, horrible shit. And is continuing to do horrible, horrible shit. So basically, Xi has taken over this ideological role of being the supreme leader, the only one another party leader in the past, the legendary Mao. And that's very scary because this is when an autocracy becomes a dictatorship. So China is already an autocracy, is already ruled by one group of people. The risk is that they're going to have soon a kind of an emperor. So a person that is like limitless, can do whatever they want, they are not accountable to anyone. And this is what's happening right now. So third term, in addition, the top cabinet of the government, of the party, has named, and basically it's 7 men, first of all. So even, there was a gender quota of 1 woman, has been scrapped. Incredible. And now 7 men, all super loyal to Xi, no dissent, no room for other views. That's very scary. That's very scary. And I think a particular scene from the Congress will stay forever in history. Actually, 2 scenes. One is before the Congress, there was a protest. A lonely protester on a bridge in Beijing burned some tires and basically present some banners against Xi, which is very rare in China. It's very admirable. Probably this person would be now in prison for many years or worse.
But have they been found?
They've been. He actually was a man, I think, and he was captured. So it's obviously very, very sad, and we hope that nothing will happen, but it's unlikely. So this is the first very important news, or like memorable episode, and the second one is the scene where basically a former president or premier of China that was sitting at the left of Xi during the Congress was removed from the Congress. He's a very ancient, old person. Ancient is wrong.
I think it's a perfect.
He's a very senior.
Of calling older people whatever. I see my parents, I'd be like, because you guys are ancient.
He's a very senior official. So the official press, Chinese press said he was removed from because he was unwell. Rule out completely this scenario, but it was really weird because clearly some guards came and almost forcibly removed him, really like insisted for him to leave, and it was done exactly at the moment when journalists, the international press was allowed in the room. So it seemed like for many observers, seemed like this was a power move of Xi and his loyalists to show that there is no space for dissent, because this other more ancient senior official was actually a reformist, one of the people that was working to make China be more open and free. So, sad news, the Congress is that. So, our point on China is be vigilant. If personally, I think that if you work in a company or if you can avoid dealing with the Chinese government, you should at all cost. I'm not saying don't buy Chinese good. That's obviously very difficult because of technology and so on. But really try consciously to understand that dealing with China today, with the Chinese government today, is very similar than dealing with Nazi Germany 90 years ago, 8 years ago. Very similar, because the Chinese state is conducing, crimes against humanity in Xinjiang, against Muslim minorities, has completely eradicated any freedom in Tibet, in Hong Kong. Might soon do the same in Taiwan, hopefully not, but there is this risk. So it's really, really bad. It's a bad dictatorship. So you should not deal with bad.
I don't think there's a good dictatorship, but yeah.
There's not a good dictatorship, but I mean, Singapore in a way is a better dictatorship. It's extreme crazy one party.
It's a democratic one party system.
Like democratic one party. But at least it doesn't go outside and kill people, at least. Or it doesn't have, I'm not sure, but I don't think they have concentration camps. But anyway, comparing autocracy and dictatorship is not intelligent.
Yeah.
But for sure, China is a very bad place in terms of governance. So if you can avoid engaging and fueling the economic engine of China, try so.
But I think more than this, it's like, again, double standards and hypocrisy. We see all of the sanctions on Russia, and yes, we need to sanction Russia, and we need to sanction Russia much more than this, and we need to support, I think, Ukrainians and Ukraine much more than this, considering the fact that they're being military attacked. So I'm not saying the opposite. But what about China? China is doing the same and worse in many places. And we've seen some sanctions, and we've seen some stuff, but not as much at all as on Russia. Like, China has concentration camps, as Andrea said. What is happening? Is it...
No, continue.
Okay, it's taking a video. So China has concentration camp. What is happening? Are we sanctioning it as much? We've seen some parliamentarians trying to do a great job at advocating for more sanctions, etc. But it's not enough. China cracked down and literally destroyed Hong Kong's autonomy, freedom, and democracy. Again, I'll repeat myself, but it's occupying Tibet, is threatening to aggress Taiwan. So it's not just like, don't interact with the CCP. It's like, vote actively in your country on people that will be extremely tough on the Chinese Communist Party, the government of China. Vote actively on people that will support freedom struggles, Tibet's autonomy, Hong Kong's democracy, Taiwan's rights of existence, and the fact that it should be admitted into intergovernmental organizations and so on. Yeah. It's like there's a complete double standards on what freedom struggles we pay attention to and which ones we don't. And again, not to say we need to pay attention to Ukraine. We need to support Ukrainians. We need to do all of this, but not only. We need to support Belarusians. We need to support Venezuelans under Maduro's iron fist. We need to support all people, Iranians and so on, that are struggling for freedom. And sanctions the government systematically. I have a big problem with the hypocrisy and like, okay, we don't like Russia today, so we'll sanction it. Great, but it should be an international system where systematically, if sanctions are the right tool, you have sanctions imposed on leaders, companies, and their allies that are committing crimes of aggressions, cracking down on freedoms and rights. For me, I want to live in a world where the day Russia threatens to invade Ukraine, yes, we impose sanctions directly, but the day China cracked down on Hong Kong's autonomy with a national security law, the day China actually invaded Tibet and displaced its government, started to open concentration camps and so on, we also systematically impose sanctions. We would not have a choice. Governments, it's too easy to pick and choose which government would be less painful to impose sanctions on because we're highly dependent on others. It's too easy. It needs to be systematic. It needs to be the case with all. Yeah. It's impossible. Now suddenly the US is a bit turning to Maduro in Venezuela because they need oil, because all of this. Okay, but why? Like, how are we turning from one dictator to another? And I think this is, for me, a big thing, is not only focusing on one freedom struggle, but having rules and systems in place so that we can answer in a normal manner to all. And it's not the case right now. And it's what we want to do. Again, self-promotion, because why not? It's minute 59 of the session, so I'm tired. It's what we want to do by creating a global governance system, which basically means like a federal union or a global country where you all and us have a right to vote, where we can elect our representative and participate democratically to choose what type of responses we give to this.
Yeah.
It's to create systems that work. Just like if you speed on a highway, you will get a fine if you are caught, right? This is the thing. It's not like you are caught and you won't get a fine. Normally, there's a law that says you will get a fine. Okay, if you commit war crimes, crimes of aggression, crimes against humanity, if you crack down on human rights, you will have a response.
Yeah, for sure.
For me, it should be automatic. It's not like, oh, today we feel like it. Today, no.
I really like the comment from Don Clive saying many governments say that China is misbehaving basically, but very few will need to do anything because they might say we don't have leverage, we don't have space. It's true, and you build your leverage. The point is, let's learn from the mistakes of the past. When Russia invaded Ukraine, we didn't have a lot of leverage. We had to, for a very painful 9 months, create energy independence. This was a costly mess for many citizens. This undermined support to Ukraine. So let's learn from our mistakes. We know that sooner or later, countries like China will do something very bad. They already have done many bad things. They will do even worse. So sooner or later, even if you are blind and you look the other way, something will need to be done. So let's start now. Let's decouple our economies. Let's ensure that there is obviously a safe harbor for those Chinese that want to flee their country, those Chinese that want to become naturalized elsewhere or just work with us. But let's ensure that we don't run blindly into the end of history or whatever, or simply like wasting so much time and energy when we know there is not the right thing to do.
There's a lot to do. So I want to talk about energy, climate, and poverty. But since we're on the topic of rights, let's just finish with 2 quick news. And again, you can find the links to all of this in the chat on the side. I'm trying to send all of the links and so on so that it's actually you can fact check it. I want to talk about Russia. So we mentioned Russia with the war of Ukraine, but we haven't mentioned Russia's horrible practices at home. Let me send you a link on Russia's crackdown on rights.
Oh yes, send us links, Colin.
So Russia has many issues, especially when it comes to human rights. And one of them is the government is extremely homophobic and is taking as a target LGBTIQ plus communities. As I mentioned at the beginning of this long talk, a lot of governments try to find a scapegoat and to turn attention away from internal problems, whatever it is. So at one point it was the war on drugs for Russia. When shit started to hit the fan, it was invading Ukraine. And now, because the Ukrainian war is going badly for them, I think they're turning attention away to LGBTIQ plus communities. And they're doing the same thing then with all of the rest, which is, gay people with corrupt society. They will try to get your children and so on and so forth. And so I just sent a link from the BBC showing Russia's crackdowns on rights. In the past, I'll open it at the same time so I don't actually say bullshit. In the past, they banned sharing, I don't know why I'm being banned on this, they banned sharing LGBT propaganda, no, I can do it, to children. What they called propaganda was basically any information on LGBTIQ plus communities. So, showcasing homosexual families, homosexuals, talking about someone's trans journey or something like this and so on. So they banned it towards children. And something as well that they do very well, which is extremely bad, is to actually, in public consciousness, it's to mix being gay and pedophilia. So they also link the two as like, this is pedophilia, you're trying to get children, etc. And now they're trying to, and they will most likely expand this ban on LGBT propaganda again, so just sharing of information to everyone. So not just to children, but to adults as well. And this basically means that if you share information about anything LGBT related, you face a criminal penalty. It will be a criminal offense. So most likely a fine, but this could escalate in the future. This is supported by all parties because obviously Russia is not democratic. And it passed the lower chamber and is expected to go to the highest one. But it will be adopted, and this will basically criminalize and remove from the public scene any LGBT plus information. I mentioned this because we've been talking a lot, like, I can't even remember everything we've been talking about. It's been an hour five. But, like, we talked about Iran and protests, about drug rights with Germany legalizing recreational cannabis, about the right of dissent with China's use of police stations abroad. And I think, and then we talked about China's crackdown in Xinjiang, Tibet, Hong Kong, and the fact that they want to crack down on Taiwan. I think it's also important to look at it from an LGBT approach, and the fact that governments often try to change and to shift their focus to something else. And here again, we see the LGBT communities in Russia paying the price. It's been the case over and over again. Russia has had a horrible, horrible record on this. But this is really heartbreaking because it will basically remove an entire community and part of the population out of the public eye. And there's something to be said that regardless, the situation is shit for LGBT communities in Russia. But to just be removed means your existence is being removed from public life. People that grow up and identify as LGBTIQ+, will have more difficulties in looking up to people that are similar, that have similar journeys, struggles, questions, hopes, dreams, and so on. And then that just suddenly, like, being yourself or sharing information about who you are or who your family is or who your loved ones are will be criminal.
No, it's horrible. I don't understand. I mean, I understand because obviously it happened a lot. Dictatorship come and stay for a long time. It's just so difficult for me to think about the steps that bring a state to become something like that. Yeah. Something where these things are acceptable, like the whole narrative anti-LGBTIQ plus right and so on. Like, I'm sure there are many, many Russians thinking, I really don't give a shit, but I just have to go along to avoid consequences. But there must be a step before. There must be a way to stop this thing before happening. It's so frustrating. And again, I'm saying this from my comfortable place in London, where actually my rights are protected. Most rights are protected, even here on protests and so on, they're cracking down. But obviously, very comfortable for me to say, but I think we need to learn lessons to identify patterns and avoid that in other places this happen again. 1 in 50 years to see countries doing the same. I would like to understand the secret recipe to actually not only protect now things or fix things now, but kind of like identify patterns and see, like, if in 60 years in Spain or in Brazil the same is happening, how can we prevent it before it gets so bad? Before minorities crack down upon, before people are persecuted, before horrible legislation put in place that are going to be forever a shame on the government and the people of a certain country. Like, I'm from Italy and I'm ashamed of all the racial laws that were done in the 40s when fascists and Nazis were basically dominating part of Europe. It's a shame, and I'm sure it could have been prevented. We were not strong enough back then. But now, are we strong enough to avoid this to happen again? Clearly we failed in Russia, clearly we failed in China. But all of us, wherever we are from, we should really, really be, like, vigilant and ensure that this doesn't happen again. I mean, there was a moment where in the US I was concerned, I think we go sideways, and we were all aware. I mean, the scenes of the Congress, attack on the Congress and so on. And still now, abortion has been outlawed in certain states. So even the US, it's at risk. We know India was a very big promise of democracy, and now it's becoming increasingly Hindu nationalistic. So we see these patterns, we should have we should have like a very, very strong monitoring system to stop it. And obviously it is actually a task for a global institution, for example, or for a global group of activists and so on. It's not easy, but we know these things happen.
Yeah.
Colombia is speechless, like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's very sad.
I think the last topic to cover, Andrea, if you want to go for it, is energy, climate, etc. So let me send you what I'm talking about.
Yes.
In the chat. So something we wanted just to explain it is, I think that's a global news. Shell has, I mean, the link has updated since I last put it there, but basically,
The news has changed.
Shell, the energy company, has doubled its profits compared to what it was supposed to be. And this is in a moment where Shell is one of the companies responsible for killing our planet. Shell is extremely responsible for climate change through fossil fuels and so on. Shell is making a shit ton of profits when customers are paying incredibly high prices. So in the UK here, our energy bills are increasing so much that a lot of people, including myself, have to think about moving. And Shell is not paying a windfall tax. So maybe on there you can tell us quickly about it.
I'm very happy to tell you about. So first of all, let's explain the terminology. What is a windfall tax? A windfall tax is a tax on a profit that has been generated through unexpected events where an industry or a group of companies profit enormously from an event, often while other groups in societies are severely afflicted by this event. So, energy crisis, the perfect example. There is disruption of supply because of Russia, general supply problems across the planet, COVID, inflation. So basically our energy bills are skyrocketing. However, because of some tricks in the markets and economics, these costs that we face are not directly proportionally reproduced into the balance sheet of energy companies. But actually energy companies, yes, probably they pay a bit more in terms of cost, but they gain way more money. So their profit, what is left after the sales and cost, is way bigger than before. So they are making a massive amount of money. They can distribute them to their shareholders. So it's a very great deal for them. And so many governments around the planet are discussing creating a windfall tax on energy companies. For example, here in the UK, where Colombia and I are based, the previous, in the UK there is a government every 4 weeks now. So a couple of governments before, when Boris Johnson was still with us, exactly like my country, a couple of governments before, Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak, that now is the Prime Minister, but back then was the Chancellor, actually created a windfall tax that was supposed to bring 5 billion people to the budget of the UK, and so help basically people with their energy bills. This is not enough. Clearly, if Shell, one of the biggest energy producer, I think that the profit they have recorded is like 3 times their average profit. So clearly they're making a shit ton of money. These are companies that are already very profitable. And yes, sadly, I'm saying sadly because I know the energy companies are also probably, helping us all to live and to have electricity, but they are also destroying our planet. They are the main polluters. So the fact that the main polluters of the planet during an energy crisis benefit so much is clearly something extremely wrong. So what can we do about it?
Go for it.
So if we had a global government, if we had a global country, if we had a global institution, we would probably create a global tax on surplus profit in the energy sector. And this would generate a lot of money. It would be well used to help people getting out of poverty, to help people paying their bills, to help people isolate their homes, because obviously home isolation and other issues in many developed and underdeveloped countries are big issues for energy preservation. So this is the kind of plan we would propose. In the meantime, as this is not possible, at least a body like the United Nations or similar like the OECD should coordinate countries across the planet for them to have kind of a similar approach to this problem, and all have windfall taxes so that companies cannot just move their headquarters or shift profits, but actually wherever they are based, whoever they are, they're gonna pay a fair share. And I'm not saying that they have to be completely taxed, closed down. I mean, that's another topic. Maybe for climate they should, but in this particular realm, they should pay a fair share of taxes, and this money could help us all paying our bills, obviously proportionally of how rich we are, how wealthy we are, and actually stop this massive crisis, the energy crisis. I live here in London. My energy bills have doubled, if not tripled, in the last 6 months. I'm a political activist, so I don't make lots of money, so it's really heavy on me. And I'm still lucky because I have a house. I don't have a house. I rent a house like many millennials, but I'm definitely very lucky. There are many other people that are way more unlucky than I am, that are really struggling to pay their bills. And if you compare the situation for billions, not billion, not but millions, maybe billions, but millions for sure, to a few energy companies making massive profits that go into dividends into their shareholders, and then they can go on holiday or do whatever they want, massive amount of money, it's just wrong. You would not design a system this way. So while fixing capitalism is a very long discussion, it's not easy, and still we didn't find a better solution than having at least some capitalistic principle in our economy. Surely enough, this situation must be fixed by states, authorities, or whoever can. And it's not been done. So what we want to say in this broadcast is that windfall exceptional taxes on energy companies is fundamental and should be done until it's possible. So very simple message that we should have.
And there's something else to be said, like, I completely agree. There's something else to be said, which is Shell making so many profits is insane, but for taxes and but for the price of living and but for access to energy and so on. Shell is destroying our planet. It should not be making so much profit. We should stop. We still subsidize fossil fuel companies. Our governments, my government, gives more money to fossil fuels than to green energy. They should not be making so much money. They are destroying our planet. They are some of the criminals destroying our planet.
Yeah. So I don't know if you work for Shell. If you do,
quit.
Maybe you should quit, or sabotage it from inside, or try to change things. But don't be complacent, because people are really, really suffering from this. And this is not something. It's not a foreign power that we cannot control. You can just hope that things are changing. It's actually companies based in democracies where the will of the people can influence the markets, the way companies are regulated. And this is a perfect example where this should happen. Do you agree, Colombe?
I agree.
Are we good for our first Twitch live?
Oh my god, I'm deceased. This killed me. It was really cool, but so tired.
We need to get trained. First of all, thank you so much. We had actually more viewers than I expected. I think it's a very good start. Some people started following us. We know that building an audience on Twitch is not easy. It's not going to take just a few minutes or seconds or even days. It's going to be a constant effort. In 2 weeks from now, probably we won't have any voice. We're going to be all like DCs on our chair, but we're going to keep on fighting to build this channel because
it's important. So send us your tips, subscribe. I guess that's what I'm supposed to say. And yeah, can't wait to see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Woo!